Welcome to episode Neuf of Down the Cheezehole.
Neuf, is that French?
Neuf is French. Any idea why we might be calling this episode Neuf?
Well, I do know why.
Tell us.
Well, we have a very special guest today. Well, it stems from the film Hot Shots, the sequel to Hot Shots, which was Hot Shots Part 2.
Which is French for two.
Yeah, and the person that we're going to talk to today never misses an opportunity to make a joke like that. For instance, the Naked Gun sequels. It's Naked Gun 2.5 and Naked Gun 33 1/3.
Correct.
So this also could be like episode 9 3/4.
Or 99%.
Yep.
Because 33 1/3 is a record speed. 2.5 is 2.5.
But I like episode Neuf.
Okay, episode Neuf, which is French for 9,
Yep.
is paying homage to a man named Jim Abrams.
Oh boy, here we go.
Jim Abrams has ties to Wisconsin. He grew up in Wisconsin, down in the Milwaukee area, Shorewood.
Yep.
Which is a northeast suburb on the lakeshore of Milwaukee. And Jim also has a summer home still to this day in northern Wisconsin. And we tracked Jim down and asked him to be on our podcast.
Yep.
And he called me back and said yes.
Yep. Very graciously accepted. I mean, he was sounding excited, actually.
Yeah, it was we were shocked, so pleasantly surprised. What we've learned about Jim since then is he's a very giving person. It doesn't sound like he tells a lot of people no, so that doesn't make us special, but it does still, because he took his time out of the day to talk to us. He's done about 8 or 9 movies that people have definitely heard of. Most of them are a little bit older, from the 70s, 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
His biggest hit by far was probably his first one.
The Airplane. Yeah. That's still probably their biggest claim to fame,
or at least I would say most recognizable for sure.
Yeah.
Airplane, which was him and 2 buddies from college, University of Wisconsin, the Zucker brothers.
Yep. And they all went to Shorewood High School. Yeah,
all went to Shorewood, but a little bit different times.
Yep. Within a span of a decade.
Yeah, right. So he's Airplane, he's Hot Shots Part 2, Roxy Carmichael, Scary Movie 4. Because was he only the 4th one?
Though they were all 3 of them were somehow involved in 3 and 4. But he had he was a writer for 4. They had different roles on 3 and 4, but they were involved in that. So he might not have been involved in 3, but so maybe the Zuckers were.
I think I said Airplane was their first endeavor, but really it probably really wasn't. Kentucky Fried Movie was their first.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk to him about that, but they got their start on the campus of Madison, starting out the Kentucky Fried Theater, which was their little fledgling theater that they started, and then moved out to L.A. and turned that into a big show and turned that into a movie, and then parlayed that into Airplane.
Yep. Well, I guess maybe I shouldn't wait any longer, because we're going to call Jim. So I'm going to get him on the horn here.
All right.
Let's hope he answers. He told us he'd be there.
We're pretty tight with Jim. We have his home number.
and his cell number.
Do you think he'd appreciate getting prank calls from us?
Asking if he needs a warranty for his car?
They did pilot episodes for a TV show called Police Squad with Leslie Nielsen, and then they parlayed that into the Naked Gun series. So, yeah, he's done lots of big comedic stuff. That's pretty well known.
So we're fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. We're gonna put you in front of your own mic, and we're gonna have you on speaker. And I'm hoping you can still hear all of us.
Okay.
So you're here with Jeff and Andy and Eric, and we're the guys that do the Cheezehole podcast. And we graciously asked you to join us, and you agreed.
Well, I was thrilled to agree.
Well, we're going to try and keep you on the phone as long as we can. And when you get sick of us, all you have to do is hang up and don't say anything.
Kind of a unusual day anyway.
Well, so we haven't had internet here at our office all day. And my wife sent me a text literally minutes ago telling me what was going on. We've been living in a little bubble. So...
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I assume you've been watching the news?
Yeah, on and off. And it just keeps getting crazier, but I'm sure you guys don't get into politics much, or do you, or no?
Well, we try not to. You know, the insanity that's going on right now is just, in my opinion, it's disheartening. You know, let's start it this way. You were a kid that grew up in Milwaukee in the 60s
Right.
when some of this same stuff was happening some 50 years ago, and don't you think we'd be past that by now?
You know, it is, I don't know how philosophical we have to get, but there is a terrific quote that says basically the main lesson we don't learn from history is that we don't learn lessons from history. and we just keep repeating the same mistakes. And yeah, I mean, this is crazy and scary, and disheartening.
Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. I mean, to me, the parallels between what is happening today, literally today, and I think back historically to, you know, Milwaukee and people,
Right.
you know, fighting about race, and here we are some 50 years later, and we still haven't figured this out, and it's so disappointing to me as a human. But I digress. We typically try not to talk about serious things. If you're okay with us not talking about this, I think we want to talk about you and what you mean to Wisconsin and what you've meant to a whole few generations of people who grew up watching your movies. So if you don't mind, we're going to go to something and try and get our minds away from this crap.
I appreciate it.
All right, well, let's see what we can do. You know, we mentioned before you jumped on the phone, just to set the stage here, Jim, we made a little shrine. We did a life-size, pretty close to life-size cutout of you. And we set it next to our podcast mic, and then we set the phone next to your life-size cutout. So we feel like you're here with us today.
Well, that's fun. Don't send me a picture of that.
We won't, but it is being video recorded too. So if we don't have permission to use your likeness, we'll blotch that out afterward. We also printed out your 9
Don't
or
you care
10
about your
movies.
ratings?
What was that?
Using my likeness isn't going to help your ratings.
No, we figured that, but you're the sexiest one out of the 4 of us, so you never know. It might help a little bit. We printed out your 4 movies. You started out as a kid in Shorewood. We found your high school yearbook. So
Right.
the first thing we wanted to ask about is that you did pretty much nothing in high school, is what it reflected in when you know how they list the little credentials? We couldn't believe
Yeah.
you weren't in theater.
No, I think that was, you kind of captured it with nothing. I actually went to high school at Riverside, or East Division, it was called back then, for the first 2 years of high school. And then I switched to Shorewood my junior year. So that's a little bit of why I did nothing. But I don't claim I was ever an activist or did anything but the minimum throughout my academic career.
Attaboy. That's what we love, an underachiever. An underachiever
Yeah.
who overachieved in the end. Well, just so we can tell our audience what you did, you were in the Spanish club, the FTA, and one thing that we don't know what it was. What is High Y?
Oh, yeah. High Y were intramural sports.
Oh, okay.
That's all that was?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. What was the other thing? FDA?
No, FTA, which is Future Teachers of America.
Oh, really?
You made that one up. You weren't even really in it. Nobody noticed on the editing crew.
But I had a wonderful time at Shorewood.
Well,
I really did. Some of my closest friends to this day are guys I met at Shorewood.
Can we talk about one particular guy at Shorewood that I'm pretty sure I have this right, which was Dick Chudnow, which is one of your original Kentucky Fried Theater pals? Wasn't he an original Shorewood friend of yours?
He was, when I switched to Shorewood in 1960, my junior year, I didn't know anybody, literally anybody. And I'd just kind of sit in the corner and eat lunch by myself. And one day, Chudnow, who was known as one of the funniest, coolest guys in school, just called me up one day, out of the blue. I don't know why. He just called me up and he said, "Hey, do you want to go to a Marquette game?" So we went to a Marquette game and we hit it off, we hit a ball, and he introduced me to all the kind of guys from our class, and that made a huge difference in my life. And then we went on to be roommates at the University of Wisconsin together, and we used to get in trouble together all the time. And we used to do skits at the University of Wisconsin in the library. We'd act out. Nobody would know. We would just do these skits. I would walk in to the library during exams when the place was jammed, and we'd wrap up my foot, and I'd have a cane, and I'd kind of go limping into the library carrying a bunch of books, and then Dick would get up and leave the library and kick the cane out from under me and down. Honest to God, I don't, anything not to do homework. And then he kind of whacked me a couple times, and then he'd leave, and people would and we would go from the ground floor of the library in Madison to the second floor, to the third floor, to the fourth floor, and each time we would reenact that, the crowd would get bigger and bigger because people would want to see anyway. So Chudnow and I had a wonderful friendship, and then, he was involved when we first started doing Kentucky Fried Theater, and when we moved out to California.
Nobody ever told you two morons, get the hell out of here?
I know.
Because I'm just wondering, at the University of Wisconsin, the way you're describing it with a full library, I picture a little chubby old librarian with glasses coming and whooping you two.
Yeah, I know. I remember, and Chudnow remembers this too, somebody yelling back then, a registration card used to be called a green card, and people yelling out, get his green card.
In other words, get him out of the campus.
I don't think there was any opposition at all. It was sort of like comic relief.
You were talking about...
provided us an opportunity not to do homework.
You said that twice now, not to do homework. Were you a good student in high school?
I'm sorry?
Were you a good student, or were you just getting by, or how did... I know that they used to say they used to let anybody back in the University of Wisconsin back in the day, or did you actually have the credentials to get in there?
Well, when I started at Wisconsin in '62, they had to take any Wisconsin resident and his $75 a semester tuition.
Wow.
Yeah, those are the days.
Yeah, that was just the law. So anybody got in. So there was no pressure on ACT exams or SAT or anything like that. It was just, that's where you're going. I think beyond them having to take me, what really convinced me I wanted to go to school in Madison was one time during the senior year, another friend and I drove up to Madison because we just wanted to see what goes on and what it's like in Madison, and we wanted to go to a Wisconsin football game, and we got there a little bit early. And so we were kind of sitting in an empty Camp Randall, except for right next to us was the card section. Do you remember a card section? I don't know if they still have them, where maybe there are 400 kids and everybody has a bunch of cards, and there's a leader in front, and the leader would call it 7, and then you'd hold up your card, and from the other around Camp Randall, it would you'd see a W or a badger or something like that. So the card section was there rehearsing an hour or two before the kickoff. And my buddy and I, another short guy, were just sitting there watching them, killing time. And then at the end, the leader of the card section, who was using a megaphone, and kind of a jerk, and he said, okay, now no matter what happens during the football game, I don't care if we're down 21-3 with 2 minutes to go, and we come back and win the game. No matter what, do not throw your cards. At which point,
the announcers kiss
everybody in the card section just threw their cards up in the air.
Of course they did.
Of course. And that was the end of the card section and stuff. But that was sort of, I never had a great academic connection with Wisconsin, but that's where it's sort of a spiritual connection that I had.
I think that most people's connections to Wisconsin is spiritual. Andy, who's here with us on the podcast, found a really neat connection to you that I don't know that you, well, I'm sure you probably have figured it out, but I'm going to let Andy share that with you.
Well, just talking about Wisconsin connections, and that's kind of what our podcast is all about. The airplane, obviously your biggest claim to fame, I would imagine, is a parody of the 1957 disaster movie 0 Hour, which you've mentioned many times. But a star of that movie, and he didn't have a very big movie career, was Elroy Hirsch, Crazy Legs, who went to school in Wausau and then played at the UW-Madison football and went on to be one of the greatest football players of all time, but had a short film career and was a star, had a starring role, title role in 0 Hour, which was then later parodied by
Did you ever put that together?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, another achievement of Crazy Legs was he was athletic director at the University of Wisconsin for maybe 10 years.
Yep.
So that was after his acting career. Yeah, and so we absolutely knew from the get-go who he was when we saw 0 Hour, and it was just the fact, we have to tip our hat to him because it was just the fact that we saw him, and as great a football player as he was, and as terrific an athletic director as he was, he sucked as an actor. So we thought, wouldn't it be fun to cast a jock as one of the pilots, and then actually call him out during the movie? And that's where that idea came from. It was from Crazy Legs.
So, you casted O.J. Simpson.
And Shaquille O'Neal.
Yes. Did you learn that from Elroy being horrible?
I think that's sort of...
Well, and Kareem.
Sort of it. And
Kareem, yes.
Another kind of fortuitous turn of events was initially, when we first wrote the script for Airplane, in the part of the athlete who we were going to call out, we cast Pete Rose.
Oh.
But we wound up filming during the summer, and Pete Rose was playing baseball. And this was before Pete Rose had been, outed as a scumbag, and so we had to write the part for someone else, and Kareem came up, and of course, it was much more fun, and it was so cool to meet Kareem.
I couldn't imagine it with Pete Rose versus Kareem at this point, honestly, but we were thinking that maybe you had some type of tie to Kareem, but he was already well out of Milwaukee by the time Airplane came out. He was in L.A. already, right?
Yeah, but I idolized him.
Oh.
He was in Milwaukee before Dave and Jerry and Chudnow and I left. So we were there for, when was it, the championship in 71 or something.
Yep.
And it was, and back then, I could go, back then, they had much different rules for seating at, what was the name of the arena?
Was it the Bradley Center? Or the Mecca?
What was it called?
The Mecca?
Was it called the Mecca? I forget what the arena, I think it was called the arena, actually, where the Bucks played. Anyway, you could go in and just wear a hat and put press in the in the band in the hat, and you could sit right at courtside and pretend you were a member of the press. I mean, there were no credentials or anything.
There's a Three Stooges episode.
I was a huge fan of Kareem's.
Did you ever see the Three Stooges episode where they steal the faucets and they go, press, pull? Do you remember that?
No.
Okay, well, I feel like your humor is so Abbott and Costello and Three Stooges. Where is your inspiration from? Because I see that type of humor in everything you do.
Yeah, I think there was a huge advantage for us growing up in Milwaukee, at least during that era. And the rules, probably, from what I can tell, still apply. When you're from Milwaukee, at least back then, you have to learn a self-effacing sense of humor. I mean, Milwaukee was the Laverne and Shirley town, stuff like that.
Happy days.
And you learn, if you're from New York, you can't laugh at yourself, or if you're from L.A., you can't, you take yourself seriously. But when you're from the Midwest and from Milwaukee, you learn how to laugh at yourself. And actually, growing up, that was, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but for me, friendship was all about dumping on your friends and making them laugh at themselves.
That's how this whole podcast started.
I'm sorry?
That's how this whole podcast started, was we were dumping on ourselves and we decided to start recording it.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure. I think there's a higher percentage of that in the Midwest and in some of these, less sophisticated. I don't know what the word is.
Less sophisticated is right.
It really becomes a way of life. So, and back then, everything that we saw, especially on TV, was literally and figuratively in black and white. So there were no shades of gray. There was no nuance. I don't even think they had invented the word nuance for television back then. So there were good guys and there were bad guys, and father knew best, and all those cliches. And if you kind of already have this kind of sense of humor where you're not taking things seriously, and then you see the way TV and lots of early movies portray people, it kind of all fits together. And you say, well, we can make fun of that, because you don't have to take that seriously.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was so much like Abbott and Costello influence or something. It's really just growing up in the Midwest, in Milwaukee, when we did during those times. And it sounds like that sensibility still continues.
I think it does. I guess, until you pointed it out, though, I didn't realize that was a Midwest thing.
I think it is.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it's a very general statement, but I think it is. It's not just so much that we learn not to take ourselves seriously, but it's such a stark contrast to the big metropolitan places where people think they're cooler.
Interesting. You think you see that, Andy? Because I never caught that before.
Well, I just the way he phrased it is that it does see it. I don't know. It seems like the people in the big cities. I guess it does seem like they take themselves too seriously.
I guess, but I mean, Milwaukee is a city, but
I mean, we Wisconsinites love to joke about the things that other people make fun of us for. We're proud of our.
We don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And look at the whole cheesehead thing. Can you imagine Californians doing that?
No, yeah.
I mean, the cheesehead thing is like the essence of not taking yourself seriously. It's brilliant.
Well, you're the king of not taking yourself seriously.
Can you imagine a song saying, "I wish they all could be Milwaukee girls"?
No, I really don't want to picture that.
Right.
No, not at all. The Kentucky Fried Theater was you were talking about your friends and how you don't take yourself seriously, and the Zucker brothers and you and Dick did the whole Kentucky Fried Theater thing. I know how that was all inspired. Dick had taken a road trip, blah, 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 and he comes back and he decides you guys are going to do this. Was that because nothing existed, or just because you were, like I just said, like we sit here and do self-deprecating humor to ourselves anyway, and we sit and make ourselves crack up? Was it to make yourselves crack up or make others crack up, or the answer was yes to all of the above?
Why we started the theater?
Yeah.
I think we started the theater because we were just having so much fun. We started to get together in David and Jerry's basement and just film stuff with no goal in mind other than just to film stuff. They had access to a video camera. And back then, one of the huge breaks we got is we were the only kids in the world, I think, back then, or very few kids who had access to video equipment. Now everybody's doing everything on their phone. But then it was a real novelty and very unusual. So when we first got together and started filming spoofs of stuff, it was just we would do it and laugh. And then we started to show it to friends and family, and they'd see it and laugh. So then we said, well, let's try this in Madison. And we did, and we found this bookstore on Regent Street right next to Camp Randall. And we kind of remodeled the back room of the bookstore and opened the Kentucky Fried Theater and started to show the tapes. And Dick was really an expert and remained at improvisation and stuff too. So we added some improvisational stuff and some live stuff to the videos. And at first it was kind of a lark. And then you're right, then Dick and David Zucker actually took that trip out to California, and they found a place where we could set up shop. And I think my recollection is our goal was we wanted to see if we could make it onto the Tonight Show.
No.
I mean, that's how high we were shooting. Let's see if we can actually make it onto the Tonight Show.
Huh. And then you guys felt like that was going to be a career at that point? Like, how are you supporting yourselves?
Right. Well, the theater, once we got it open, I mean, we each had a few grand when we moved to California because we had to remodel this building, or semi-remodel the building that David and Dick had found. And then from the time we opened the theater, it supported us. You know, we made it. I think initially, the ticket price in Madison was $1, and then by the time we were open here, we were up to $2 or $3, and then actually got the price up to $5. So we lived on whatever revenue we made from the theater.
So it was self-supporting. I guess I just always assumed, like, I just pictured it differently. I don't know why. When I think of back to when you guys were still in Madison, you know, at that time, I'm pretty sure Second City had already started down in Chicago.
Yeah.
Was that something you guys were aware of? And like, why didn't you go that route? Or have you not even heard of it? Or you just figured you wanted to do your own thing because Second City was something different?
Yeah, I think the bigger inspiration back then was David Zucker went to see Groove Tube. Are you familiar with that? Groove Tube was something done by Kenny Shapiro. It was a theater where he made silly videos, and he would show it to people and they'd pay. He went on to make a movie called Groove Tube. But I think that's when David came back from seeing that, and we were all aware of Second City, but I think that was the Groove Tube thing was the main inspiration for getting our theater going.
So you guys knew of Second City, and it just wasn't, that just wasn't the angle you wanted to take. You wanted to do your own thing, and clearly it worked.
Well, and the other thing I think that differentiated us back then from all the other Ace Trucking and Second City and all that stuff was that we never got political. And, Nixon was so right for the taking.
Yes. Well, Saturday Night Live played him up as much as anybody back then.
Right. But we never went there. We always, made fun of commercials or movies and stuff like that, and we never went political, ever. And, I shouldn't say ever. I mean, you can find an occasional random joke here or there about Ronald Reagan or something, but basically, we just steered clear. That was never our instinct. It was not like a conscious decision, but our instinct was always pretty much just to make fun of the media, not politics.
I think it would be nice if people would start to take that direction again, because again, we're going to get a little bit political here, but now it seems like, again, all Saturday Night Live does is concentrate on political humor, pretty much one direction at this point, because it's so easy. But, and then the whole fake news thing, it's like, I don't know, so much of that has just been ruined by injecting politics into I just wish we could get off of it a little bit and go your direction like you guys were thinking back then. You guys had said, like, I don't know who said this, if it was you or one of the Zucker brothers, said that what you practiced was comedy judo, and it was essentially using like fooling your audience, like leading them a direction you think you're going and then taking it a different way. And Andy and I were playing clips of yours for the last month, basically, since we talked to you. Yeah. And number one, all your stuff holds up so well. And I think that's why, is because what was funny 20 years ago, or 30 years ago in some cases, is still so funny now because you don't expect it to go that direction.
Well, yeah. I wish I had aged that well.
Well, that's unfortunately the way it goes. I wanted to give you another little Wisconsin tidbit that I found while we were researching you. Apparently, Jake Leinenkugel, which is the Leinenkugel Brewery, and I know you still come to the Northwoods when you're here in the summertime, so you know what Leinenkugel's is. Jake Leinenkugel saw you guys in the Kentucky Fried Theater Days in Madison. Did you know that, or did Jake just say that somewhere?
Oh, that's cool.
Jake Leinenkugel said in an interview that he still uses the fried egg skit that you guys did at Kentucky Fried Theater at parties at his house.
That's great.
Which is,
at
the... Go ahead.
That's we actually eventually did make it onto the Tonight Show, and after we moved out here, I think in like 73 or 74, we made it onto the Tonight Show, and that was one of the skits that we did on the Tonight Show.
Oh.
Isn't that just, you act like you're an egg and you crack yourself open and you sizzle?
Yeah. Well, actually, it was Jerry Zucker who did the fried egg. Yeah, and that's what he did. And then he just sort of vibrated around, and then he flipped himself over and did the other side.
Comedy was much simpler then.
I'll say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
again, the essence of it, I think, was... if we could find, it's about not taking yourself too seriously. And I think a lot of those jokes are, people think about, obviously the highest profile, like Don't Call Me Shirley, and everybody takes that seriously. And when you make that pun, a little bit, when people laugh at that joke, they're laughing at themselves for taking that seriously.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And even, I think, with the part of what made Airplane sort of different and than most comedies is everybody knew that Leslie and Peter Graves and Lloyd Bridges and those guys were straight actors, had been serious actors, and they were kind of laughing at their own expense. It was kind of that they would make fun of their own careers by being those goofy guys.
Yeah.
And that has a sort of endearing quality to it too. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking it.
When you guys finally got on the Tonight Show, and I watched an early interview, you guys were on the David Letterman show when David Letterman was like 12 years old.
Right.
And so are you guys, for that matter.
Yeah.
Was there, like, once you made it big, so to speak, was there like pressure all the time to be funny, or you feel like you might have lost your position? Is that a ton of pressure when you're young kids going out there?
With our material or personally?
Both, I guess. Like you guys were on the Letterman show, and I said to Andy, I'm surprised Dave didn't kick these guys right off, because he was trying to ask you serious questions, and not one of you, except for you, would reel in the Zucker brothers every once in a while, or at least you tried, unsuccessfully. But it seemed like you felt like it appeared like you've always had pressure to be funny, maybe.
Huh. Well, I don't know how Dave and Jerry would answer that. I've always felt that. Especially since early since Airplane, I'll bet I've been to 1,000 meetings and parties and whatnot. And when I'm meeting people for the first time, you can kind of see the glow, the excitement in their eyes. Wow, this is one of these guys who made all these comedies. He's going to be so much fun. And I'm just going to laugh my ass off and stuff. And then slowly I can kind of see the disappointment creep into their eyes.
Because you're just a normal Joe.
No, he's not really that funny. And then after a while, he's kind of even boring. and that's it. And that's happened to me 1,000 times. And I don't mind that. So I feel no real obligation to try to be funny. I think in our work, we always tried to be funny. Mm-hmm. We always, because that's what we did, was try to be funny.
In your work, Andy and I have both sat and wondered for the last... Well, first of all, you said when people first meet you, they have that glow. We've had that glow since we talked to you on the phone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever saw it, but when Chris Farley was on Saturday Night Live, they let him do an interview with Paul McCartney. Did you ever happen to see that?
I probably... it sounds familiar.
He goes... So Chris Farley goes up to Paul McCartney, and
basically Chris Farley has a talk show in which he doesn't know what to ask people. Like they're very awkward interviews because he can't. Go ahead, if you have it.
No, that's exactly it. And he just looks at Paul McCartney and he basically goes, "You were in the Beatles, man," and he's like awestruck and just sits there the whole time with a glow. In shock that he's talking to Chris Farley, which is just it's a funny thing because I think that's how Andy and I felt early on, but you've already made us comfortable and I'm sure you're getting ready to hang up any minute. So we'll try and get through a few more of our questions. One of the biggest questions Andy and I were wondering is you've kind of stayed out of things. Now, I don't know if that's by design or by choice since, the early mid 2000s. Do you have anything sitting on the shelf that you wish you had still done?
Well, not. My life took a big turn. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, we did know that, and I thought that might be the reason.
Yeah. So I had a kid in 1992. Our youngest kid was born and developed severe epilepsy, and he was really, really sick, and they drugged him a lot and operated on his brain and nothing worked. And then I started doing some research on my own and found out about this thing called the ketogenic diet, which had been developed at the Mayo Clinic in 1921 as a treatment for kids with bad epilepsy. And none of the doctors who Nancy and I had taken our son Charlie to had ever mentioned diet to us. And yet, when I started to look through the medical literature, there were decades of very consistent data that the diet was very effective for kids with bad seizures. So we found someone, a dietitian at Johns Hopkins, and went and put our son on the ketogenic diet, and he went from having dozens and frequently as many as 100 seizures a day and 4 anti-epileptic medications to 0 in a month. And that changed my life.
So basically, family took the front seat over writing and directing.
Yeah, and I knew how there's a world epilepsy population of 60 million people, and I knew a lot of people had to be suffering unnecessarily the same way as ours had, and so I just that became my passion, letting other people get the same information, so they didn't have to go through that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm. And it still is.
And that sort of, I love the movie business, and it's really fun. But the movie business is, at least for me, it was a passion business. If I wasn't really, passionate, I'm not smart enough to just go and paint by numbers. So unless I was willing to, really die for it, I wasn't a very good movie maker. And so, but this advocating for the ketogenic diet is something that I've become very passionate about, and so I keep doing that.
Is the movie business ever going to be what it was when Airplane came out? It's just such a strange, even we had a conversation about how I have 3 stepkids who are all teenagers and they've never watched a Green Bay Packer game.
You're kidding.
They've never sat on the couch and watched a Green Bay Packer game. They just don't consume that way.
Wait a minute. And are they from Wisconsin?
Yeah, we live in Three Lakes, and I don't think it's just our family. I'm just saying that teenagers don't consume the way. Now maybe that's a Wisconsin, but they're consuming in small doses or via YouTube, their attention spans aren't that long.
Oh gosh.
I guess sounds like I just told you something you didn't know.
I never envisioned. I mean, David and Jerry and I and a few other guys from Wisconsin get together for all the Packer games. So not this year because of COVID, but we always do, and we tape the games, and then so we can fast forward through the commercials. But I can't imagine life with no Packers.
Yeah.
Well, and it's not that they don't care about the outcome. They all they want to see is the highlights. And that's how I think that I'm nervous that this younger generation, and I'm 48, Andy's like 10 years younger than I am. And he and I were wondering out loud is like, what is this next generation? When you're talking about creating some type of entertainment, whether it be a movie or a TV series, and that's not what they do anymore. They just watch YouTube channels, and maybe that's a good thing, because if you're creative, like Kentucky Fried Theater in 2021 wouldn't be a physical set location in Madison, Wisconsin. It can just be filmed with your iPhone in a basement. I don't know. We're getting philosophical here, but I was just curious if you had ever observed those same things, but clearly I can tell by your surprise you haven't.
Not really. I mean, the grandkids are very young. It's clear that they're going to take to all the electronic stuff pretty easily. But part of the fun of a Packer game, and that's a social event, is just between the plays, and you talk about it's not just watching the highlights. I mean, so I don't know what kind of price is being paid for the absence of conversation in the next generation. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I do think there is going to be a price to be paid, and then even again, I don't know what the outcome's going to be either, but it was one of those things that I thought you might have some really intellectual, deep thoughts on, and of course you let us down because you already told us you're not funny or smart.
Exactly. It's like when we did make the Tonight Show, we kind of tanked, and really up until like 20 years ago, every time I went back to Milwaukee, I would have to apologize to people who stayed up late that night.
You didn't get an invitation to the couch?
No.
Oh, boy, I didn't know that. I don't even think...
No. Nor did we get any laughs.
We wouldn't have interviewed you had we known that in advance.
Why do you think I held it till the end?
Well,
I got another question, because you mentioned that sometimes there were points at which you struck out a little, or maybe things weren't going. Did you ever have that with a project where you just sat down with your group and we're working on a project, and you got halfway through and said, "This is not going where we want it to go. This is not. It started out funny and now it's not funny, and I think we need to start over." Did you ever get halfway through a project and realize that this wasn't working?
Yeah. Oh yeah. One time, this is again right after. I mean, it happened all the time with jokes, and I think, the fact that David and Jerry and Chudnow was always comfortable on stage, but we weren't comfortable at all on stage, and so if we tried a new bit or a new joke and it didn't work, that's how we learned editing, how to cut things. But in particular, I think of one bigger swing and a mess where after Airplane, and we were kind of full of ourselves, and we thought we were a hot item and everything, and we came up with some stupid idea for a movie, and we went to Paramount, and we pitched it to Jeffrey Katzenberg and Michael Eisner, and we could kind of tell they were kind of stunned. And Michael said, Michael Eisner ran Paramount back then, and he said, "Are you kidding me?" he actually thought we had made up something stupid just to try to put them on, and that was a big tank. But I think we swung and missed lots of times, and the good news of that is it did teach us how to edit and how to cut things.
Yeah, and you talked about, especially like with Airplane, after that had hit the cutting room floor, then you had taken it around to some college campuses to again find out what got laughs and what didn't. Did you always take that approach to the movies that came after that as well?
Yes. Yeah, I think that was the most. It's really the single scariest part of the whole movie making process for me, anyway, because it's the first time when you're writing the script, everybody's laughing and patting each other on the back, aren't we cool? And then when you're making the script, making the movie, everybody's laughing and enjoying it, and then you cut it together, and the first time you go public with a public screening, then those aren't your friends, and those aren't people who know you. Those aren't people who care about you. You know, they're just sitting there, and so they're really blunt in their response, and that can be, you know, some of the stuff that you thought was just home run kind of material tanks, and you can't get to the editing room fast enough.
Well, Andy and I are convinced that we're going to write a movie, even though it's getting late in life for us, because Andy and I feel like we're the two funniest people we know. So maybe when we play it to middle...
It's debatable.
Eric doesn't agree. Maybe when we play ours to middle America, they say if you can make the Midwest laugh, you can make anyone laugh. But we have one favor to ask you, is if Andy and I actually write a script, you have to come out of retirement to produce and direct. And I can tell you there's probably not much threat there, but...
I'd love that. That would really...
That might motivate us.
Cool.
That may motivate us.
Do you have a story?
Well, we have no story. I feel like that's why Jerry Seinfeld's show was always my favorite show, the show about nothing, because Andy and I have a tendency to come in every morning and laugh about nothing, along with Eric.
Right.
But we'll come up with something now that you somewhat agreed that you would do it. And we've got you on
I'd
record.
love to. That sounds fun.
I'm going to let you go. I just wanted to tell you, number one, thank you. I can tell when we researched you, I can tell you're an extremely generous person, just by the amount of content that's out there, whether it's about, you and your dad, or you and your family, or you and Charlie. And I can't thank you enough. We appreciate having you on. You did. I grew up with your movies. I can't say that you put anything educational in my head, but I've always been the class clown, and I think I have you to thank for that. So
yeah, well, it's a great honor for me as well. When I think about everything I love about comedy, the best of slapstick, the best of the deadpan stuff, the best of the absurdity and the ridiculousness, and if you put it all in a blender and mix it up, you'd get the kind of stuff that you do. It's the comedy that's right up my alley. So this is really an honor for me, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for screwing up our formative years, in other words.
I apologize.
Well, thanks again, and if you make it back to Eagle River and COVID ever goes away, we would love to take you to a fish fry if you're willing.
Oh, I'd love to.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I'd love to. That would be great.
We'll see you this. We'll see you this summer with a mask on. We'll be able to identify you by your glasses.
Yeah, you will.
Okay. Thanks.
That's a whole other story. All right, thanks, guys. It's great talking to you.
Thanks, Jim. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Bye. Wow.
Do we want to wrap it up at all?
Let's just do a recap. I don't know. I guess I don't know what to say other than, like I said, he's clearly a generous person. If you jump on the internet, he doesn't really turn down many interviews, but still to take some time with a handful of guys from northern Wisconsin, I thought that was pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And I think we covered everything you wanted to talk about. I don't know. I guess we could just say good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
Good night.
Good evening.